Louder? Is that all right? Feel free to turn yourself to face this way. It's easier for me to see you in that way, which I appreciate. I take refuge in the Buddha, all of our awakened nature. I take refuge in the Dharma, the teachings of truth. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community of spiritual friends, as they say, the one body which does not disappear. So good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you all here. This is the first full talk for the Metta Sesshin, Friendliness of the Heart at Sangha Jewel's Zen Center here on July 12th, 2024. We're joined by folks on remotely. Thank you for joining us. And you're joining a group of people who have been practicing wholeheartedly all day today. And I think it's important to say that it takes a lot of courage to sit all day, to do Zazen all day, to face ourselves and our mind all day. And it's also joyful, too, to be in community and practice what is good to practice. So tonight I want to talk about the theme of this retreat, Friendliness of the Heart, and that is metta, loving kindness. What is it? Why practice it? Why bother? And how we practice, or ways to practice. So metta is the Pali word. Pali is the language that the oldest Buddhist texts are written in. So the metta is the Pali word, and it's often translated as loving kindness. It's one of the four immeasurables, also known as the Brahma Viharas, the four divine abodes: compassion, wisdom, sympathetic joy, that is taking joy in others' good fortune, and metta, loving kindness. And these are four dwellings of the heart. And they're immeasurable because they can never be used up. So something brought you to this retreat. So what was it? Why did you come? Something brought you to practice meditation, to practice Zen. What was it? Some of us come to practice because we have an inkling that there's more to this than just the surface of things. We have an inkling that there's something more to see. This can be a wordless drawing forward. And not exclusive to that, there's also It's not one or the other. There's a way, some of us are brought to practice because of difficulty. That our heart is not at rest. Our mind is not at rest. There's a kind of gnawing that there's something off. So it's important to reflect every so often about what brings you to practice, to remind ourselves. One of the things that we notice when we start to practice is that our minds are kind of wild. There's a lot going on in there. That the Buddha talked about that the human condition involved dissatisfaction. Often translated as suffering, the word dukkha, the Pali word dukkha is really, a better translation is stress, dissatisfaction, friction. So a lot of us are like, well, I'm not really suffering. People are really suffering. There are people out in the world who are really suffering, way more than I am. And that's a kind of comparison that's not so helpful. And the Buddha was talking about the kind of grating dissatisfaction that even when we get what we want, it changes and we're unhappy. Or even when we get what we want, it's okay for a little bit and then we're unhappy. Even when we get comfortable, we get the perfect position in meditation. This is perfect. And it changes. And a fly lands on our nose and it's itchy. That oftentimes we're in this habit of clinging and aversion. The source of this dissatisfaction is clinging and aversion. Trying to hold on to what we like and pushing away things that we don't want. We cling to something that makes us feel good about ourselves, feel safe. But because things are constantly in flux, because of the truth of things change, we get anxious about this. We don't want it to change. I like how this is. I don't want it to be different. So we try and hold on. That's the clinging. On the other hand, something arises that we don't like, we try and push it away. It might be a feeling, it might be an emotion, it might be a person. We try to get rid of it. And this cycle of clinging and aversion creates a pervading sense of dissatisfaction. And that is what the Buddha was pointing to. Anxiety, dukkha, friction, stress. So because of this, we relate to our world through our conditioned habits of clinging and aversion. Now, this is not to find one more thing to beat ourselves up about. This is a description of the human condition. And the freedom comes from realizing this is happening and being able to step out of it. To have a choice to change our relationship to our world so that it's not based on trying to change it by getting more of something or getting rid of something. So we take up this practice of zazen, of mindfulness, paying attention to the direct experience of the body in the present moment. We practice with the breath, noticing coolness of the in-breath, the warmth of the out-breath, the subtle movement of the body as it breathes. Feeling the direct experience of the body. Because one of the reasons why we have so much stress is our world collapses around our thinking. It's not that thinking is bad. We're not trying to get rid of thinking. What we're trying to do is enlarge our experience of our world, because so much of our thinking is not about what's actually happening. It's about something that happened in the past that we kind of remember, or it's worrying about how things might end up. So we ping pong back and forth between the past and a past that doesn't exist anymore, or a future that hasn't arrived, doesn't exist, and may not arrive in the way that we imagine it. And it almost never does. It's almost never exactly what we think it's going to look like. So we practice mindfulness, paying attention to the direct experience of this body, because the body can only be in the present moment. You can't breathe for next week. You can't sneeze for last Christmas. The body, returning to the direct experience of the body, enlarging our awareness beyond just our thinking about our world to include our actual world, which is the present moment. The only thing that truly exists in our world is this present moment. So one of the things that happens as we do this practice and we pay attention to what's going on here, we do start to notice what's going on in the mind, and we see this cycle that happens. The wonderful thing about that is that once something comes to the surface, we can actually work with it and learn. So, what is this metta, loving kindness? It's often translated as loving kindness, or goodwill, loving friendliness. And it's the quality, the capacity, the inclination of the human heart towards friendliness. Ayakema, who is in our women's lineage, was a 20th century Buddhist nun in the tradition of Southeast Asia. And she was a Theravada nun originally from Germany. And she has written about loving kindness practice. And she's a wonderful no-nonsense teacher. She was originally from Germany, and her family fled when the Nazis came to power when she was 15. And she didn't go back to Germany for a long time. She married, became a mother, found Buddhism, supported it as a married mother. But eventually she ordained and became a teacher and practiced and taught on loving kindness. And she says, instead of loving kindness, we can call it unconditional love, which is probably a more succinct statement of what it's all about, she says. Instead of loving kindness, we can call it unconditional love. So what does that mean? So what is love? Are we practicing in order to feel a particular emotion? So is love an emotion? If we're going to practice unconditional love, maybe we'll just even figure out what conditioned love is. What is love? Is it an emotion? Well, sometimes. We call it that anyway. But emotions are temporary. Sometimes we feel loving towards someone, and sometimes not. But does that mean that we've stopped loving them? Because we don't necessarily feel one way. Does this person have to be in our mind in order for us to be loving them? So does love stop? So this is how it's not an emotion, because I could be doing our taxes, but that doesn't mean that I've stopped loving Joma, right? I'm certainly not feeling particularly loving when I'm doing the taxes. But we'd never say like, oh, well, love doesn't exist between us anymore. So it can't be an emotion. Emotions are temporary. Doesn't mean that they're not real. Emotions happen in our experience, but they're temporary and they're not the absolute truth. They come and go. And so as we practice metta, if that's love, if we want to try that definition on that Ayakema gives us, that sometimes when we practice it, we'll feel something. And sometimes we won't. But that doesn't mean that love isn't moving through us. So the feminist writer Bell Hooks has a wonderful book on love, and she talks about love as a verb. So we might try that on for size. It's more of a verb than a thing, an emotion. The feelings are secondary. Sometimes they're there, sometimes they're not. For example, a bleary-eyed parent doing a 3 a.m. feeding of their baby. She may just feel groggy, and that's it. But what she's doing is an act of love for that baby. So the feeling part it's wonderful when it's there, but it's not the whole picture. So we might try and emphasize that metta is a verb, an action, a movement, a flowing. And if it's unconditional love, then that means that it's love no matter what. It's love without an agenda. It's love that says that enacts itself, that flows no matter what. And sometimes that current feels strong, and sometimes that current trickles. So love without an agenda. How do we do that? How do we do that? How do we give up the agenda? It has to be this way. Or I have to be this way in order to deserve love. Love without metta practices we're included in this. So how do we do that? One of the ways that we keep it simple and straightforward is by a practice of welcome. Welcome whatever comes. It's allowed. It belongs. There's a wonderful poem that points to this by the poet Rumi. It's called The Guest House. And it goes like this. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they are a crowd of sorrows, who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. They may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door, laughing, and invite them in. Be grateful for whatever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. This is a part of the practice of metta. This is part of the practice of zazen, welcoming whatever arises. Noticing when the guest shows up that when there's aversion, we notice that. Or a guest who wants to stay, or uncomfortable. It's all welcome. And so we can think about what is a good host for our experience. So think about a good host. You've been to if you've been to a fun party, somebody throws a great party, somebody's a great host. So what is that host? So first of all, they pay attention to who shows up. They pay attention. They notice. The second part of a good host is curious. They ask you about yourself. If they know you, they say, "How have you been? What have you been up to? How are you?" Especially if they know you well. A really good host will really get to it. How are you? What's going on? They're curious. They're interested. They're interested. So this is how we do our zazen. This is a way that we can orient our zazen to one of paying attention, being curious, being interested. And the other thing that a good host does is they don't dwell on the guest who comes. A good host doesn't come, a good host lets people go, shows them to the drinks. There's where the beer is. There's where the treats are. So in that same way, when we have, in our zazen, when we have something arise in us, an intensity or something, or rumination, a good host kind of like lets that go. We don't dwell on it, we let it go. So we pay attention, something arises, something we're interested, curious, what does this feel like, especially in the body, and then we let it go. So being a host for our guest house, a good host for our guest house. This attitude of welcome in our zazen is the same kind of welcome that is loving kindness. It's inviting in whatever we're experiencing. So metta, unconditional love, is love without conditions, love without an agenda. Do I deserve it or not? In the light of metta, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if I've been a good boy today. It doesn't matter. In the light of metta, Everyone's included. It's without an agenda. The question is irrelevant in the light of unconditional love. Did you do what I want? Irrelevant. I love you anyway. Do you agree with me? Are you going to vote how I want you to vote? Irrelevant. Doesn't matter. Love without an agenda. Now, this is a caveat, this is not about accepting abuse, leaving a situation where harm is happening is vital. We wish, may you be at ease, and I am leaving this situation for the both of us. So of course we need to set limits for people. We can love and also be discerning. Set limits. Parents do this all the time. They love and they set limits. Sometimes it's best for us to practice metta for someone who's a long way away. It's better that they're over there. We're in the past. So, and when they show up in our heart, we can be kind, but it's for our own sake. And for theirs, perhaps. So, it's important for us to be discerning too. That's why one of the divine abodes is wisdom. We don't only practice metta. Part of what arises is wisdom. So that's discernment about the situation and what's called for. So how do we practice? What are some ways to practice? These aren't the only ways. And I hope that one of the things that happens in this retreat is that you practice with curiosity and interest and explore for yourself what you notice about in practice. We've introduced some ways of doing it, but they're not the only ways. So there is a little bit of a paradox as we practice. And this came up in some of our discussions today, some of our groups. So is metta a change strategy or acceptance strategy? Are we trying to change something? It's like, wait a minute, Bansho, you said we're just welcoming everything. On the other hand, sometimes we find ourselves in the realm of change. So it's a little bit of a paradox. Luckily, in Zen, we love paradoxes. We're sort of built for it here. So it's perfectly acceptable. So this is a line that we find ourselves dancing in our practice. Sometimes we're over here more, sometimes over here. And in the life of a practice, we may weave all kinds of ways. And it's even not a straight line. Practice is not a straight line. So sometimes we feel ourselves in the realm of change. For example, I am ruminating, believing old stories of self-criticism. I'm feeling anxious. What do people think of me? How is this talk? Believing old stories of self-criticism. I should have done it this other way. When will you ever learn? Right? Feel my heart beating, stomach a little tight. So I feel anxious. I notice anxiety. So I use the phrases. May I be free from fear and anxiety. May I be at ease. May I be happy. May I abide in well-being. May I enjoy my life, the happiness phrase. So in one way, there is change there. I was feeling anxious. I did the phrases. Something shifted. So there is change there. Something changed, something shifted. Moved from aversion directed inward, ill will, anger towards myself, unskillfulness, not helpful to engage in self-criticism, to perhaps a more balanced place. So in that way, and one facet, way of looking at it, it was a change strategy. So it's also acceptance. No matter what thing I did, skillful or unskillful, I am included in kindness. Doesn't matter. Not just because I'm doing things the right way or X way, or I set some standard that I met and therefore now I'm okay and I'm allowed some grace. So in that way, it is acceptance because it is welcoming, however, whatever's here. But it's opening from beyond the sort of narrow, fixed rut. It's a rut, a mental rut of self-criticism. Kind of pop out of that and into a wider view. So that we practice for ourselves, that we welcome however we are, and then through wisdom and discernment and settling ourselves sometimes, then we can learn. We give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. So what about practicing metta for others? Again, in the Metta Sutta that we chanted, it says, wishing in gladness and in safety, may all beings be at ease. Wishing in gladness and safety, may all beings be at ease, whatever living beings there may be, whether they are weak or strong, omitting none, no one is left out. The great or the mighty, medium, short, or small, the seen and unseen, those living near and far away, those born and those yet to be born, may all beings be at ease. So I want to underline omitting none. That is a tall order, isn't it? Because it's one thing to do loving kindness for the birds who sing tonight, or the trees. Human beings are a little bit tougher. But that is the promise of the practice, that we can show up and be not leave anyone out, including ourselves. So in this change, so again, back to this like acceptance or change, when we shift from the habitual aversion to our experience or aversion to that person, what changes? It's not that we've conjured metta. What's changed is our reactivity. When we shift out of habitual reactivity and let go of our agenda, metta is not a creation and conjuring, it's a letting go. It's setting aside. It's noticing our agenda. Oh, you have to be this way in order for me to respond, or I have to be this way in order for me to respond to myself with love. That's a letting go. It's a letting go. So other people, other beings, they need to be different, better, kinder. They need to be less poor. They need to be less rich. Pick your least favorite political figure. They need to be different. If we offer metta to them, they haven't changed. We step away from the picking and choosing of who is lovable and who is not. The one more thing that we uncover as we do this practice is the immeasurability of love, of unconditional love. That it doesn't run out. Love doesn't run out. And you can experience this in your practice of the phrases. And we did that today. First, we started with a dear one. We offered them loving kindness. We spent 7 minutes offering loving kindness to a dear one. And then we offered it to ourselves, and it's like, oh, I only have a quarter tank left for myself. There, we turned our awareness, our attention to ourselves. There was love. Something. There was love. We could orient it then to people sitting next to us. It's not like, oh, wow, I'm out now. I did it for my dear one. There was just crumbs left for me. Now there's nothing left for you. Then all of a sudden, we can do the practice. There's love. So this metta practice, this love is immeasurable. It's unboundaried. You could offer loving kindness to someone halfway around the world. I mean, I offer unconditional love to people who have gone beyond. They're not even in this physical realm anymore. I offer them metta. That love, setting aside, oh, they're dead. I can't practice metta. I can't offer them kindness. I can't offer them love. It's irrelevant. Love is beyond death, beyond distance. There's never less of it. There's always more to be revealed to us through our practice. And we do it bit by bit. Again, this is not about sort of conjuring up something. It's it's paying attention to our experience, engaging in the practice, and seeing what happens. It's a letting go of our agenda, noticing, oh, there's an agenda here, and seeing if we can soften towards it, and then allow and see what moves through. But we have to practice it, and that's what we're here for. Thank you all for coming. Do it together. Thank you.
Inhale.